Okay, in this video tutorial we're going to look at taking the pillar that we did the UVs for and actually going into Mudbox with this to do some little bit of sculpting on this and some painting. So first of all, I'm just going to prepare this to take into Mudbox. Right now this is still in its low poly form, so this is all we have. I'm going to actually just create a few more sections on this, or a few more cuts on this, to start giving it a bit more detail to take into Mudbox. To give Mudbox more to work with. So I'm just going to go into my mesh tools, insert edge loop tool, and go into the options for this. I'm going to use my multiple edge loops. I'm going to use 3 on there. I'm just going to go in, just wait for this to catch up, and just put some cuts down all of these. In fact, let's just undo this a second. Control Z. What I'm first going to do, just click on the W, is duplicate this. So click on this, duplicate, just move this to one side for now. Now let's do those cuts again. So insert edge loop tool. Then I'm going to go in and just put 2 cuts and do this down. Okay. This just gives these more even squares to work with, which will make the sculpting work better in Mudbox itself. So we've got 2 options with this. We could take this over to Mudbox Live by going to File, Send to Mudbox. I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. So what I'm going to do with this is actually go into Export Selection. I'm going to choose my Mudbox export. I'm going to save this as pillar. I'm going to call this pillar 02 because I know I have one already. I'm going to save this as an FBX export. Okay. Click on export selection. Go into these options. Okay. And then from here we can open up Mudbox. Once Mudbox is open, just pause the video there. I'm just going to close this down. File, import. So let's just import FBX. Okay, and just navigating around the Mudbox interface, I've got this set to Maya settings called controls, so we can just use the same controls. We use Alt and left button to rotate around this, use middle button to pan, and Alt and right button to zoom in and out. I'm actually going to be working with a Wacom tablet with this, so let's just switch across to that. And we have the same controls essentially. Let's switch this over. So Alt and click down. We have our rotate, Alt and our bottom button. We have our pan, and Alt and the top button. We have our zoom in and out. The Wacom tablet's much better to work with something like Mudbox. You get the pressure sensitivity, and it just feels more natural. So, first of all, I'm going to add some more subdivisions to this. So just go into our mesh menu and add new subdivision levels, or Shift D. You see the polygon count increasing as we go up. The higher the polygon count, the more detail we can actually sculpt into this. So just using a normal sculpt tool, a sculpt brush. We have our brush options, our size and strength. What I'm going to use a shortcut, so B, held down moving the mouse, and M, same thing. M key held down moving the mouse is our strength. So I'm just going to start to go in this, and you see sculpting on the surface. Actually start to detail this model out. Press Control down, we actually sculpt into the surface, so that's just the Control key, sculpt, Control to sculpt inwards. We can also smooth this out using the Shift hotkey, so we can use a combination of those. So I'm just going to start to sculpt in some of the details. I'm trying to do here is just create a bit more surface detail, create a bit more interest, and also just give it a more interesting profile or silhouette. So the great thing about the Wacom tablet is that we can, with the pressure sensitivity, if we push harder, we can actually create more of an indentation, and we can do quite light strokes. And work all the way around, just adding detail where we need it. Now at this point I'm just creating the bigger details on this. Don't worry about the finer details. You can always create a new subdivision level and start in those at a later date. So mainly just going in with the sculpt brush, sculpting in using the control key, smoothing out using the shift key, the shift hotkey. You can also use a grab tool, just increase the brush size, and we can actually start to change the shape of this. Be careful with doing this too much because you can change the mesh, the original mesh. If you do this quite a lot, it's quite important to actually re-export the mesh out from Mudbox back into your 3D software, in our case Maya. Okay, back to the sculpt brush. I'm just trying to cover most of the model with this. Just to give a bit more of an organic feel. Obviously, you can spend a lot more time doing this, trying to do it quite quickly, just in the confines of the tutorial time. I'm just looking at the wax tool. This gives a slightly different look. It's a bit more of a flatter brush. The sculpt tool tends to have more sculptural detail. The wax tool is useful for building up detail bit by bit. Just subdivide this again. Okay, we're going to go into some of the stencils. We're just going to add a stencil on here. It's just a custom stencil, just an image found online. And just using probably go back to the sculpt brush. So now we're using the image to sculpt some of this detail in. And just kind of creating broad strokes on this. Nothing too heavy right now. The great thing about the stencil is as you start to sculpt in, it actually hides the stencil. You can see what you're working with and actually see how this is changing the model itself. You can see our options down here as well. We can move, scale or rotate the stencil using the S key. S middle button for move, S left button for rotate, and S for right button for scale. Also hide the stencil using the Q key. Quite useful when you want to see exactly what areas you've been working with or you covered. And again, we just keep sculpting in, adding the detail to this model. Again, being careful with this because if you sculpt too heavily, it's going to balloon out the shape a bit too much. So I'm just trying to get this surface detail on there. This is quite a quick way to do it though with just an image like this. Just going around this and making sure that we do every part of the model and get this distributed quite evenly around our pillar. Okay. The important thing is just to keep looking around your model, seeing where you need to add the detail in, seeing where it's missing. So just that Q key to hide the stencil is really useful. It's going to click that off. Let's go look at stamps. Quite like these. Quite like these for surface detail on characters' muscle tone as well. Really nice look to it, almost like a rake tool that you would use in sculpture or in clay sculpture. Again, just control to sculpt this into the surface. So you can add as much detail as you want to your models as you're going through. Again, this is just quite a quick introduction to some of the Mudbox tools, more to show the workflow between Maya and Mudbox. Just staging it a bit more down at the bottom. This is where it would have probably the most damage done to this. Just changing the space on this. This is going to space the brush further apart. It's not as the effect isn't as clumped together. Just gives it a wider spacing, useful for just changing the look of some of the brushes. Again, just going through here, adding the detail, adding quite wide strokes. And I think we're pretty much there. Just, you can keep going as much as you want, but I say just conscious of time for this tutorial.